happens when life's hardest moments break not just you, but the relationships around you? Whether it's betrayal, loss, strain through tough times, relationships can be shattered under pressure. They're fragile. But here's the truth: broken doesn't have to mean broken beyond repair. So today, what we want to do is dive deep into how do you rebuild trust, connection, and love when hardship of life has marked your relationships. Because healing isn't just possible, but it can make your relationship stronger than ever. And Jada, I know that today we have somebody amazing. So tell us who we have today.
Absolutely. Well, today we have Wendy Gibson. She is our special guest. Wendy is certified as a life purpose coach. She's one of the founders of Sacred Journey, a women's ministry out of Oklahoma, dedicated to helping women discover their identity in Christ and live out their God-given purpose. Alongside her husband, Wendy is also a board member and active participant in Choosing Love, a marriage ministry that focuses on strengthening relationships through intentional love and communication. We can't wait to hear what wisdom that Wendy has for us today, and she is the perfect person for this interview. So welcome, Wendy. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you.
So excited. So I just have to, for the listeners out there, I want to say thank you so much. Remember, please save this podcast, because we're going to do the rubber meets the road, and you're not going to want to miss the words of wisdom this beautiful woman has to share with you today. So if you're on the treadmill or in your car, make sure to save this so you can get it. But I do have to say a little disclaimer, because it will come out in the interview. Wendy is one of my favorite people on the planet. So she is one of my dearest friends and somebody I call for prayer and support. But the one thing that I want to say, and Jada will back me up on this is how I describe Wendy to people who haven't met her, that it's impossible to be in the room with her without your soul feeling joy.
Oh,
she makes
that's
you
true.
laugh, and she just brings happiness and excitement in every room. When I first got to meet her, ladies and gentlemen, it was so funny. I didn't remember her name. I'm not the best with names. Dyslexia is not great for name remembering.
yeah.
Sorry, Wendy. But somebody was like, "Oh, we're bringing that lady that you met over." And I said, "Oh, the one that makes me laugh." And so that's how I knew her. So today should be really fun because anyway, her joy just exudes between everything she does, even though we have a tough subject. So Wendy, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for the amazing compliment. That's very sweet.
Well, it's true.
And I feel the same about you, dear.
Well, good. I'm glad. You're like, "Oh, I don't like her." No, that would
No.
be all right, so I want to get into this. So we're talking about on this episode how life can happen and it can hurt relationships. And I have been pretty honest with our audience that through some of my trauma, Jada's been honest about some of her trauma and some of the impact it's made. So today, thank you for sharing your experience to help our listeners unpack their own trauma and get some relief. But first, I want to say, you've experienced betrayal in your life, have you not?
Yes, I have.
Right? So
In many
let's
forms.
what? Pardon me?
I said in many forms.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately,
You
I know
know?
your whole story, so that is sad. Take us back to a moment. Take us, the listeners, and tell us a time. And I really want to talk about you and particularly your current husband, your amazing man who I love and adore. And if anybody ever gets to be able to be fed by him, you'll be blessed by heaven. Um, but tell us, in that situation, when you discovered the moment of betrayal.
Well, so I'm a quote girl.
Mm-hmm.
And my two of my favorite authors are John and Stacey Eldridge. I don't know if you've heard of them or not, but there was a book I was reading, and this he had a quote in there, and it said that sometimes that God will use the dismantling of your life to bring you back to Him. And so this betrayal moment was one of that moment for me. We had just been married for a little bit over a year, so we were still in our honeymoon phase, and we were on a trip in Vegas when this betrayal was exposed. So my emotions that I had going through that, went from being in this total blissful state, all was just amazing, to being just pummeled into shock and this despair, and then of course the anger ensued. And he had also known about in a previous marriage that I'd had a similar sort of betrayal. So, and he knew the impact that had had, which was extremely hard on us. So my fight or flight took in, and I took off running through the streets of Vegas, which, so I looked pretty normal and screaming and crying, you know, getting to the hotel we were, getting on an elevator and going up to a floor. I kept trying to find a floor. They had conference rooms at this one, and I went in there. And when I say dismantled, I literally fell on the floor on this carpet in this hotel and was just reeling in it, ugly crying on this carpet. And it was at that time I felt a really hard tap on my shoulder. And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody has found me. I'm embarrassed. And I turn around to look at who's there, and nobody's there. And it was the first time I audibly heard from God. I believe it was God saying, you know, Wendy, you keep trying to do this life on your own without me. You keep running from me. And he was right. I was doing that. I had been running from him a lot. And so this kind of brought me to this moment of my need for him, if that, yeah.
Wow. Wow. I have not had the same betrayal you have by any stretch. The only, what you say, I have to just say that I'm visually feeling that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And what it reminds me of is when Savannah, my daughter, was only 3, she had her first major surgery. And we didn't know it at the time, but the narcotics were killing her. So I held her in my arms for literally, it was over 5 hours, thinking that was it. Like we were just, and I will give that story later, but it ended up not being it, and by the grace of God and
Yeah.
a nurse. But I remember after I got through that, going up to the top of the children's hospital in Portland, Oregon, and falling on my face on the playground and telling God, I can't do this. Right? I mean, there was physically no emotion to get, like empty, devastated, broken.
Yes.
And so my heart goes out to you, because that is a place I would never, I'm going to cry. I would never wish a human being to go through that
Right.
type of excruciating pain. So you go from laying on the carpet, and I just told the audience that you have this loving, awesome, amazing husband.
Right.
So after trust was broken, what gave you the strength to even consider rebuilding your relationship?
Well, after that encounter on the hotel floor, something just came over me. There was a calm. I don't know how to. I knew I need to get home.
Yeah.
So getting home, and trust me, there was still the shock, the anger, the complete just devastation. It was guttural, literally. But I got home, and my reaction was to immediately find a counselor. And my focus wasn't on him.
Yeah.
It wasn't on my marriage. It was on, how am I here again? And so my reaction was to find a counselor that specialized in the betrayal. I didn't want some willy-nilly counselor. So I found myself doing this research, and I wanted to get in as soon as possible for me. So, and another, God was such a part of this process too, because this woman I randomly found through doing the research on the internet, she had a message on there, and I messaged her, and I put my phone number in there, went downstairs. I'm out on the back patio and just crying. I cried a lot. And I get a message from her, can I call you? Which that's not very normal for a counselor to do that. And this woman called me, And I'm on the back of the patio and talking with her, and she had this calming presence about her, and she talked with me, and she was so just sympathetic and empathetic towards me. She literally got me in the next morning and said, just, can you come up here? And she ended up being less than a mile from my house. I mean, I could have walked there. So all of these things where I look back at it now and go, wow, how he was in that. And so the next morning I'm getting up. I had told my husband, I'm going to see this counselor. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's happening here. And he asked if he could go with me. And so I agreed. I said, okay, you can come. Part of it was I'm going to completely ream you in front of her, and I want to see how you respond.
Fair.
I can laugh at it now. I mean, thankfully, but I did. I wanted to see his response. And so we both went. We shared, or I shared what was going on. It was really through the tears. I could barely speak. And at one point, she actually asked for me to leave the session to go outside, spoke with him. I don't even know to this day what he said, what she said to him. And then she had me come back in and him leave. And she asked me, Wendy, first off, do you want this marriage? Because some people go through this and they're like, I'm out, but we had just gotten married. There still was this love there and just utter disbelief that this person that I'd known that had, this was going on for him. And so I just told her, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm in such shock. And she told me, she said, I have been through this hundreds of times with hundreds of other couples. And I know, I can see when the person's really engaged, where there is truly remorse. I am seeing that in him right now. Do you have 6 months? And I'm like, I don't know if I do. And so she said, do you have a month? And I said, yes, I can give you a month. And she said, because I will let you know, you can trust me on this. If you're both coming, and she did not want us to come together. She wanted him by himself and me by myself. And she said, I will be able to tell you with pure confidence that this is going in the right direction, because I see it when they don't. It's kind of like a heart doctor that can see all the symptoms and they know what's going on. And so I agreed to do that. And we put up some guardrails of how we were going to do that. We were able to stay in our home. I stayed upstairs, he stayed downstairs, and we went to counseling from that time on. And that was the remorse that I saw in my husband was almost palpable. There was never a blame. There was never, well, this has been going on. It was all, and honestly, at one point, he actually said to her, I am so glad that this is out because I hate this piece of me. Oh. And I can see what it's doing to her, and that's making me hate it even more. But I want to get rid of this. I don't want to be this person. And so we started from there and were able to move forward in that way.
A couple of things that I heard there that I want to make sure the listeners hear is that you immediately knew you weren't going to be able to get through it by yourself. You leaned on your faith and you sought help. I think that's a critical piece there.
Yes.
The other thing, knowing many people who have gone through betrayal in marriage, his remorse at the beginning, wow, what a gift.
Yes.
That he had, I don't know, the heart, the wisdom to realize how he needed to be remorseful. Mm-hmm. That is a gift in that hardship. Yeah. So he chose to start working on himself immediately based on what you said.
Yes.
He chose to take responsibility for it, take responsibility for the impact it was making on you. He even, if I'm hearing you right, he took the responsibility that I don't want this a part of me anymore. Like it was controlling him.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing is he was in bondage.
Yes.
What was keeping him in bondage was going to make him lose everything.
Right.
So the exposure was a gift.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So how did he choose to be honest and working on himself? So those of the people out here, we've got two people listening, right? One of them is the person who's the betrayer, and one of them maybe is the person who's being betrayed. What were the signs for the person being betrayed? What were some of the signs that showed that your husband was working on himself and being honest? What did that look like? What actions did it look like that were honest for him to rebuild your trust? Because I want people to hear that. So if you're the betrayer, hey, you might want to take note.
Notes.
And if you're the betrayee, these are some of the things you might want to look for. So unpack that for us, Wendy.
Well, from the initial meeting that we had with her, he really put in the work, and it wasn't begrudgingly. It was, I mean, because let's be real, counseling is expensive, you know, so are divorces, and so for us to go individually once a week to counseling, and we did that for almost a year and a half, and he never missed unless there was something that was beyond. He never missed. He never complained. She encouraged him to go to a treatment center in Tennessee. Those are expensive, but he went, and that was huge. When he got back from that, they take it's a faith-based ministry that they have, this treatment center. There were 30 men there. He went through that, and he came back. He went scared. He came back a new man. I mean, he was so happy for going through that. And so everything he did empowered him just a little bit more. So then he wanted to meet our pastor, because I had told him, hey, this is not an ultimatum for you. I'm going to go back to my church community. I needed to. And he ended up following. And I didn't tell him he had to, but he wanted to go. And so after he had gone to the treatment center in Tennessee, he went up to our pastor, and the pastor that we had at our church introduced him to a ministry here. It's called True North, and it's a men's ministry where they have these base camp retreats, and he started going to those, and he found out he wasn't alone, that there are other men going through this. I mean, a lot of men. And just from doing that and learning, it empowered him even greater, to the point where he started getting up on stage and speaking to these men. And he would come home and say, every time I'm up there and I connect with another man or men, multiple men, and share my story, my scar gets a little bit smaller.
Oh.
The healing that he was getting from helping was huge. And so, that was just seeing those things. And so, doing the base camps, and it just kept empowering him. Every time you do something like that, I would see a different man coming home. The transformation was good. You couldn't help but see all this wonderful stuff happening, and it was good.
Wow. What a huge testament. And I know he's still highly invested in telling his testimony, which is brave. Can we just say that? I mean, I love that mic drop moment when you said that the more he tells his testimony, the smaller the wound. I mean, that's huge.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
It's true. Yeah.
Wow. That's and that he wasn't how many, and you and I both know, because of that ministry, that in a room full of 50 men in that ministry, more than 75% of the men would stand up and have some type of issue of betrayal, either mentally or with their eyes, or some level, right? And so I think that being able to be humble enough to share that story is so powerful. All right, so I want to talk about forgiveness, because I'm sure there's people listening that are like, I don't know how she could forgive. And we're not going to give, by the way, listeners, we're not going to give you the dirty details. No one needs that. What we want to talk about is betrayal, right? And it comes in different sizes and shapes. It doesn't matter. It hurts the heart. And forgiveness is not easy. And it's not natural, by the way, right?
It is.
And in our culture today, um, it's very much you hurt me, then you're out of my life. Forgiveness isn't something, unfortunately, valued enough. And the power of forgiveness is not valued enough in our culture. But tell us, for those listening, how did you do that? Wendy, how did you go from on the flat to start to forgive him? How did you reach that place where you could truly forgive him? And what role? Let me ask you that first. How did you go on the floor to actively forgiving him?
Well, it's kind of funny, but here he was going and doing all these things, right? He was listening to our counselor, and at some point, when you realize, okay, I think we're going to work on this. I'm going to Tennessee for a treatment, going to all these base camps and getting really involved to the point where he's helping other guys, right? Our counselor said, Wendy, you might want to look at going to a retreat. So there is a retreat called Change that I went to. That's basically, they were sister brother retreats. What that, we'll go with that. And so they had the same concepts, but it was for females. And I went, and the concepts that I was learning there, because I went and I really I didn't have that forgiveness yet. And but I was learning about where my identity is, my identity that I have. We all have our identities, but mine was placed in being a wife and being a mom and being a grandma and being a friend. And, that's where I found my identity. I learned about finding out my identity in Christ. And so when I started, if I'm going to have my identity in him, I need to learn more about him and learn about his teachings. Well, of course, forgiveness is one of the big, come on now, love your enemies, all of these things. That is a huge basis of that identity. And so I'm listening to the teacher that's at these retreats, and she's talking about how you may have to do this over and over, but it's not something that you have. It transformed from, this is something I have to do, into something I get to do. Wow. He forgave us. And if, I want to be able, I'm practicing on forgiving just as quickly as I want that forgiveness for myself. So that was huge. Just finding out it was something I get to do. And it took time. But overall, and over that time, it brought me a lot of healing and ultimately just freedom, because that's not something he wants us to hold on to,
Yeah, I wanted to ask that, and you already brought it up, but because you were active, and active meaning you said forgiveness is not a one and done, right? It's a consistent thing. It's an action. It's a choice, right? You get to do it. But you claim that helped you heal.
Yes.
It healed your own wounds.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because you and I both know the world is walking around with people with very big wounds.
Yes.
So how did forgiving in this detrimental situation heal you?
Well, so a big portion of the retreat, which ended up being the just us deciding, a group of women that we all had gone to decided we want to go deeper with this. And so that's when we started the Sacred Journey Ministry in 2022, and really figuring out like what that was. And, there's not one of us that comes through this world that makes it through without getting a wound. And so a lot of that was me taking the lies, the lies that I would hear from our spiritual enemy, from him saying, you're not valuable. You're never going to find somebody who's going to be good to you. You're not worthy of a relationship based on trust and love. They just come pummeling at you. So capturing those thoughts and making them, obeying them to Christ. That's part of a forgiveness process for me, because those are not truths. That is not true what he says to me. So the only time a lie like that has the power over you is when you agree with it. And so we call those agreements. And I worked through those agreements. I wrote them down. What is this? And then I wrote down, okay, what is the counteractive of that lie? What does God say? What does Christ say about that? So going through that, my identity getting deeper with that within Christ made it easier to forgive. I mean, it wasn't like, woohoo, okay, there were times things came back. It's not, you can't go through a betrayal like that. I mean, there's different levels, right? Like, I can forgive you for not meeting me for something or being late. That's easy. But this stuff, of course, it's going to take more time. And then the healing does come through that.
All right. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So many people need that. But now let's talk about, so one thing to start forgiving somebody, it's another thing to build a marriage after it. Tell us, what helped you guys build a marriage beyond that?
Beyond that, we became very proactive. It started becoming a part of our identity. We continued our counseling for over 3 years. If we need her, she's got our number, and we can call to get a pick if we needed to pick you up. But now she actually refers people to us. She tells us that you're one of my favorite stories of people who have come through the other side of this. We kept attending the separate retreats. I started going, and then of course started the Sacred Journey. And we share our stories. We want to help others. It's gratifying to do that. It's vulnerable. It's a little scary sometimes, but we've always been able. I mean, when you come through that and you see the almost relief on people's faces of, I'm not alone. Like, it's wonderful. And so when we were asked to be on the Choosing Love board for this marriage ministry, and it is based on also the Eldridge and Stacey Eldridge's concepts, we just love going. We'll go to the retreats. We'll get up and talk to these couples about the importance of doing the work and doing it together. It couldn't be just me doing it. He had to come alongside. He had to do that with me. It wouldn't have worked had we not done that. So that was the way we kept building, and we don't want to stop. It does. I don't think you ever reach that place where you're like, we don't need to do anything anymore. We're good. I think that's an unsafe place to go.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you.
Yeah.
As my husband, the Marine, will say, complacency kills. And so
totally.
Yeah.
A marriage, I mean, no matter what, even a marriage takes all the things. It takes you working together. It takes you being proactive for it anyway, even when there's not betrayal. So it's going to take even more to finally get you back to that place. So you got to keep working no matter what.
I can say, just because I'm on the outside, that your marriage is thriving.
Yes.
You guys are very good friends. You're great parents, co-parents, grandparents. You have beautiful, wonderful children and grandchildren. You have an impact in the community that goes beyond just your ministries. And but so looking back, what have you learned through this? And really, because you have so much depth of your life, what have you learned about love, forgiveness, and the power of second chances?
Well, kind of to what I was just saying, that the journey, it took both of us. And, like, again, healthy marriages need to be doing it as, with or without the betrayal. And so what was wonderful for us was through this process, our slate became completely clean. And there were no secrets anymore. That's lovely. And there weren't any secrets that he had to keep hiding. Through this process, began, we put things in place. We put guardrails in place, as far as,
Yeah.
traveling together. There
Right.
were no trips to DC without his wife. There were, we wanted to be together just to protect each other. And so that, having that fresh, clean slate just brought freedom for both of us, for him, for me, and ultimately for our marriage. And that gave us a lot of that power, not power like, but just the feeling of safety again, to
Mhm.
where it was at a wonderful level, and it has maintained. It has not ever faltered. There's never been one time where I have questioned that, since we've gone through all these things.
That's restoration.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
true.
restoration.
Yeah,
And goes to the point that if you're listening and you have a relationship, there is possibility for restoration. I do want to say, not a lot of what Wendy is talking about is mutual work.
yes,
So if you're in an abusive relationship right now, please hear us. That doesn't mean you have to stay.
right,
This is a
right.
mutual, two people working together to have restoration that is possible.
Yes.
So that's really important. But hey, I want to wrap up the interview here, and I know you have lots of wisdom to tell people out there. So tell us, as to the listeners, what's one thing that you feel like, if they have a relationship that they think is beyond repair, what's some great advice would you give them?
Well, for me, the first thing was for me reestablishing my relationship with Jesus. Especially after that encounter I had, that was pivotal for me. But I would definitely say, do not attempt to walk this alone. You can't. You can't go buy a book that's going to help you, get through these steps, and it's impossible. Get with a counselor who is trained in a whatever betrayal you were facing, and walk through that with them. It was That was some of the biggest steps that we had. And then find a community to lean on. We have a small group. I love our small group. All the members of it have been through similar situations, not all the same, but very similar. And so that's been very helpful for us, because they have automatic empathy for us. And the support that we get, the support system is wonderful. You need support. Even if you don't have this going on, I believe every marriage needs to have a small
Mm,
group or a community, to where they can, because life is hard, with all the different things. So
right. Amen.
that's, yeah, very important.
Well, I cannot thank you. I know I'm going to do some rubber meets the road, and I might bounce some more questions off of you later. So, but before we get into that, we do have people, and I think it's important that we give you science and facts to help you understand the reality of this. What does it mean? And everybody knows, if you follow me, that my facts and figures girl is Jada. So, Jada, throw some facts and figures at us.
You know I will. Awesome. I have 3 areas where I want to talk through today. I'll try to make it brief for those that don't super enjoy the facts and figures, but if you don't enjoy it, honestly, just skip through the next minute and a half and meet Athena where the rubber meets the road. But to get started, so I wanted to talk through trust can be rebuilt through consistency and vulnerability, something that Wendy touched on, but the science there also says that trust, once broken, can be repaired through that consistent behavior, open communication, which will allow you to rebuild emotional safety over time. The key study there is Dr. John Gottman, where he's a leading relationship researcher, and he found that couples who rebuild trust after betrayal focus on 3 key actions. One is expressing vulnerability, second is practicing forgiveness, and the third is consistently meeting each other's needs. Key insight there really is just trust isn't about grand gestures. It really is rebuilt moment by moment through intentional actions that show reliability and care. So I think that sums up really well what Wendy was expressing today.
I'm
Uh,
like, Wendy, did you know that you're science?
Wendy's our science girl today.
Yep.
The second area I want to talk through is conflict itself doesn't break relationships, avoidance does. So, relationships don't fail because of conflict. They fail when partners avoid addressing the issues, and addressing conflict directly, even when it's difficult, will strengthen bonds. So a key study I found on that was in 2018 study in the Journal of Marriage and Family found that couples who engage in constructive conflict resolution, which means listening actively, expressing emotions respectfully, and seeking solutions, have higher relationship satisfaction. And the key insight there was facing problems together rather than avoiding or blaming helps relationships grow stronger after hardship.
Mm, that's truth right there.
Mic
The
drop.
science is good today.
It is. I have one more key area. Is where relationships heal through forgiveness and shared meaning. So the science there, it says that forgiveness and finding a shared purpose after adversity are two critical elements in relationship recovery. The key study shows that research from the Journal of Positive Psychology in 2017 found that couples who practiced forgiveness and reframed hardships as opportunities for growth reported greater intimacy and emotional resilience. And the key insight there is letting go of resentment and working together to create a new vision for the relationship can transform pain into a deeper bond. And so I think
Mm.
Wendy and her husband have done that so beautifully in their ministries that they're a part of. And so, yeah, just wanted to share those statistics kind of behind what Wendy shared with us today. But Athena, I know you have some rubber meets the road for our people that are taking notes or saving this podcast and coming back to it later when you can take notes.
Exactly. Exactly. You know I do because
Yes.
our heart, first of all, I think it's really interesting. By the way, Jada pulled that science before we interviewed Wendy.
Yes.
So that was amazing that the science was like dead on. So that's beautiful. But you guys, you know, our heart is we want you to be aware. We want you to hear the stories. We want you to hear the science, but we want to give you practical things. We want to make an impact. We want you to know, like Wendy said, that you're not alone. So let's just start with this. And remember, Jada will have resources in the show notes. So if you can't write these down, she'll make sure that you have some resources. But first, we got to start with honest communication. Wendy said that, right? We've got to start with honest communication. So how do you do that? Schedule a time to talk without distractions, with the intention to listen to the person that you are trying to reconcile with, to rebuild a relationship. Very important. Also, remember to use I statements to express your feelings without blame. I feel hurt, not you did this,
Hmm.
right? Don't you did because of you. That doesn't work. It's this is how I feel. This is what this is doing to me. I will tell you in my marriage, if I don't do this correctly, the conversation is not fruitful. So
Right.
remember to make it where you're expressing self. So that's really important. And by the way, that should go in all relationships, but especially if you're working on reconciliation. And then commit to ongoing communication. I think this is important. Wendy really touched on this. Make the time to come together and talk. Listen. Don't be dialectic. Be kind to each other, and then allow the person to process. And then let's communicate again, and let's communicate again. And remember, in the conversation, by identifying one small step you can both take forward, and have weekly check-ins or whatever works for you, but leave the conversation in a positive way. Okay. And so think about that, you guys. Number two, rubber meets the road, where I want you guys to think about is commit to consistent actions to rebuild. Wendy talked a lot about this with her husband. He talked about doing the actions. So trust is built through consistency, right? That's what he did. She wasn't going to trust it, guys, just because he said it. That's not going to work. So think about this. Create a small, actionable commitments that you can do to rebuild, right? And if you are the person who's been hurt, write out some actions that you need from them if they're struggling with that, right? You can communicate that. Responding to text properly, like, right? Following through on promises, showing up when they said they're supposed to. Think through, it's unique to each person's relationship and what has gone on, but make sure that you're doing those steps in a positive way to rebuild that. By the way, you guys all know I like a journal. So a little practical tip, create a journal, right? Create a journal and then write out your feelings. Put all of this into one place for yourself, because you never know when you get through the other part of it. Pull out that journal. Think about the think about the journey. All right. So practical rubber meets road. Here we go. Number 3, practice forgiveness on daily. Practice forgiveness daily. I This is critical when a relationship has been severed by trauma or betrayal. Remember, forgiveness is an action. So how do you really do this? Reflect daily on the question: am I holding on to any anger or pain that no longer is serving me? Really think through that, right? Using mindfulness or journaling to process the lingering emotions. Write down things, and release them. I know Wendy in her ministry, they write letters and they burn them, right? You guys burn
Right.
them at the end and you're like, we're done with that. We're
Right.
releasing that. And so think about that. Lack of forgiveness is bondage. I'm just going to
Yes.
say that. Lack of forgiveness is bondage. You're not forgiving for the person, you're forgiving for yourself. Really important to understand that. So, forgiving daily. And I want to say a tip here: don't put a time limit on the forgiveness, right? Wendy,
Right.
it took them a minute, right?
Yeah.
So, don't think it has to happen too fast, or forgiveness can be a daily choice for a long time. All right. Number 4, my last rubber meets road, is start building reconnection with the person by shared activities. Do life with them. Wendy and her hubby went to counseling together. They went to groups together. They started ministering together. So look for ways that you can reconnect emotionally and physically together, in order for you to rebuild a relationship. And this doesn't have to be just husband wife. This could be friendships. This could be mother daughter. It could be any type of relationship. So how do you do that? Choose activities you both enjoy, right? Cooking together, taking a walk, something. I know with my husband, I don't like golf. He does, so I drive the cart, right? I'm not going to golf. It's not my thing, but I'll go drive the cart and set aside connection time to nurture that relationship. I know Wendy and her hubby spend a lot of time together. They vacation together, they travel together. And I think it's important that you start setting that time to connect. And then celebrate the little victories, you guys. Celebrate the little victories,
Yes. Yes.
right? It's in those little victories. It's the he did this or she did that, or wow. Anyway, really important there. And so these are some practical ways you can take the science and this story and help it impact your life. Every step of momentum, you guys, helps you become and live the life that you deserve. And so, Jada, where do we go from here? How do they get this information? How do we connect? Help us out.
Yeah. So Wendy, I'm going to ask you, sorry putting you on the spot, but I am going to ask you, how can people connect with you or even the ministries that you mentioned? I know you mentioned True North, the sister based camp. What are some ways that people, if they have found themselves, either the betrayee or the betrayal or betrayer, how can they seek help and how can they connect with you if that's something that they desire?
So they could email me. I can get, do you want me to give the email?
Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll make sure it's also in the show notes.
Okay. So I have a separate email for, it's called Let's End PA at zohomail.com. So I don't know if you have that. Okay. And then also we have a website, Sacred Journey Women's Ministry.org. And we have those ongoing where they do the core and they also have the advanced. So those are things if they want to go and look at those. And then I believe that True North's website is truenorth.live. Um, but I can I need to make sure on that. So I'll get back with you so you can put those on the show notes and we'll make sure they're correct.
Perfect. That's awesome. Well, perfect. Well, yeah, then I'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes. Make sure that Wendy's email, Sacred Journey Women's Ministry, and True North are all in the show notes. That way, yeah, if anyone wants to and is seeking reconciliation, restoration, all of the above, they are welcome to email or join those ministries. So Also, another place where we can go from here is if you did enjoy this podcast, we would love for you to like and subscribe so you can continue to join us next week. Next week is the last one of the season, but don't worry, we'll be back for another one.
Season 1 done. Wow.
Another one. But aside from that, always have to be a little jokey here, but you can find us just about anywhere. So if you want to find us on other streaming platforms or social media, just Google Athena Captain and you're bound to find us. But on a more serious note, we don't want to be just noise. Our heart really is to give you resources that change your life. So we have created a resource guide for you. We'll make sure that is in the show notes. You can download that. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Athena or I. And then also just want to leave you with this tidbit. This is not your practice life. So don't wait for it to be perfect. Start messy, start scared, just start, because nothing changes until you do. So take one step today toward the life you want and dare to share it with us. We'll be here standing with you every step of the way.
Yes.
We'll see you next
Thank
week.
you guys. See you soon.